With clouds of holly, now I fight the letter. Yeah, it's better than King of Pharaoh. Oh, the good times all together. In the places you before us. Like the harp and joy the Torah. Follow me in merry measure. While I gather you like treasure. Not the weighty of your passes. And the beauty lost and lasting. Here we join us all together. King without the wind and weather.
Oh, that's what it's all about, folks. La da 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 da, joy to the. All right, we're back. Obviously, when you heard good music, you know Patriot Cement's on the radio, especially Christmas. Welcome to Patriot Cement. My name is Joshua Bennett. Got Mr. Mike Anderson here in the studio with me. Morning, Mike.
Morning.
Turn you up. All right.
Okay, got me now.
Good. And online, we got Dave from faraway places like Canada, our evil friends to the west, east, north, something like that.
Build the wall.
Build the wall. Keep the Canucks out.
That's right. Keep the Americans out.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we don't. I don't know about that. Yeah. So sorry about last week. We didn't know that we weren't going to be on the air because of the online or the radio auction. Otherwise, we would have let you know beforehand. But that stuff happens. No big deal. Away we go. As you guys know, here in Fairbanks, it is snowy outside. So we're in the Christmas mood. Remember to listen to us on 97.5 on the FM dial. Obviously 660 AM. But the rock and roll sounds better on FM. You can check us out on TuneIn Radio app. Download that on your phone. Look for 660 AM, 660 KFAR. You'll find it. Or the 660 AM, 660 KFAR app itself. Works pretty good. I've tried them both. I just use TuneIn because it has so many more other options. I think there's probably other ones, but also we're streaming live on YouTube. Go to YouTube and look for Patriot Lament or Radio Free Fairbanks. You can jump in there and join the discussion because you can do live, live comments on that. Sometimes we respond on there, sometimes we respond on air, but of course it's a lot more fun to just call in at 907-458-8255. And one last thing, the station likes me to remind you all that KFAR is celebrating their 80th birthday, 80th year on air in Fairbanks, Alaska, which is a long time for a town that's only been around for 50 years. Or however long. So how you guys doing? What's up? What's going on? we weren't on air last week, and the world's still here. So that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
It's confounding at the expectations of everyone.
Well, we like to live on the edge, keep people going. Just for an intermediate thought here, you guys know who Tulsi Gabbard is. She's the Democratic person from Hawaii running for president. And it's kind of funny because she is amazingly anti-war, regime change or whatever. At the same time, she's in the military. Mm-hmm. She was, I think she's in the reserves now, but she was deployed twice. But she's as far as establishment goes, she's the anti-war candidate this go-around. She's the Ron Paul, only in regards to war, because her economics are very third-gradish, childish, ridiculous, socialist. So besides war, she's just pretty much like the left, the rest of the left, except she's not as commie by any stretch as, say, your Warren, Bernie Sanders,
AOC.
Yeah.
The kindergarten level.
Right. And she is, to an extent, she's the only, so like if you're an NRA person, and they're pretty lax and pretty weak sauce in my book, but so if the NRA had to pick someone, they would say that Tulsi Gabbard would be their gal because she's not anti-Second Amendment, which is interesting. She's not full-on Second Amendment like the Founding Fathers were, like I am, like we are, where we should be able to have Abrams tanks in our backyard if we can afford them and buy the fuel. But she's not a radical lefty anti-gunner. So anyways, my point to it is she's anti-war. So the establishment's going after her like nobody's business, right? They just tried to ignore her, but they can't. She kind of has the Ron Paul effect where online she's blowing everyone away. And interesting enough to me, Tucker Carlson has her on weekly on his show, which gives the Fox News people a chance to listen to her. And Tucker Carlson, who, again, is, as far as economic views, he doesn't know a thing of what he's talking about. They're all the same there. None of them know anything. But he's been very, very good anti-war. Very good anti-regime change, bring the troops home. What are we doing, police in the world type of thing. So he has her on because he's intrigued with her, because he sees what's happening to her. And I think he's trying to, and I can't put words in his mouth, but I think he's actually trying to use her in his platform to push the Republicans to be a little bit more anti-war. He's got motivation for it, right? And I think he's doing it to encourage Trump to be more like what he ran on election the last time he was in the election. He was the anti-war, anti-regime change, bring the troops home, I'm going to do this, and we're going to get out of Afghanistan, blah, 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 until he got elected and found out that presidents actually don't have power.
Right.
So, anyways, the problem is the Democrats have, and this is the juicy fun part for us anarchists. She's a woman, identifies as a woman, actually is a woman, and as she likes to say, she's a woman of color because she's Hawaiian. So, from some stuff I was reading on Target Liberty, which everyone should go to every day, she's been pulling the race card on her Democratic friend, because they've been attacking her now, saying that she's a Russian asset. And I guess she was on The View and which you should never watch any day. And those psycho hose beasts that are on The View were attacking her. And she said, so you're calling me a Russian asset? She said, I'm offended by that, whatever. And one of the hose beasts said, well, I'm not saying that you're willingly, but I'm saying that unbeknownst to you, you're actually being used by the Russians because you're anti-war. She said, so you're saying that I'm stupid, which was great. You're saying I'm too stupid to understand that I'm being used by the Russians. She said, have you ever been in the military? She said, I'm the only one running on both sides that have ever been in the military. I've been in war. I was deployed during the war twice. And you're telling me, and of course, that's when she dropped, as a woman of color, I'm offended. And as a woman in uniform, I'm offended, and so are all of my brothers and sisters. You know, she laps that part up pretty good, right? Overuses it, in my opinion. But whatever, it's working for her. So it's really fun, to get to my point, to watch the Democrats and the establishment have this. Basically, it's really enigma for them, because how do we attack this lady who's anti-war when everyone else is pro-war? The government's, the health of the state is war, right? We know that. Everyone in the government's for war. How do we attack her when she is not a white person and she's a woman and she's still in the military?
Well, yeah, it's interesting that the host beast, as you call them,
Hose beast.
Hose beast.
Psycho hose beast.
Yes. Good term for them. Anyway, yeah, I mean, by their logic, I would say...
I made that up there.
Yeah, well, by their logic, you know, Obama, when he was running, must have been a Russian asset, too.
Oh, yeah.
Remember, he ran on the anti-war platform. It was obviously a hoax.
He was going to shut down Guantanamo.
That's right. He was a Russian asset.
Not only that, remember at the end of his first term, he was speaking with Vladimir Putin and what's the other comrade's name who was president at the time?
Medvedev.
He was speaking to them by phone, he was in a conference, and he was mic'd up, unfortunately for him, and he said, look, guys, I can't do anything now, but when I'm just give me a chance, keep it low. When I'm reelected, we can start working together. Now, how is that not a Russian asset? And I don't think he was. I mean, in my mind, presidents of Russia and America should be talking every day.
He was a Goldman Sachs asset,
right?
But yeah, you say Goldman Sachs asset. That's not the truth. Never goes over well with those in power. So yeah, you got to say Russian asset.
Russian asset. When you're a Russian asset, I don't know. I think that we need to have more Russian assets in the American government. Because Russia, and here's what I'm saying, Russia does not have a empire attitude. Russia's just trying to take care of themselves, right? They just want to sustain, basically they're in sustain mode. Let's make sure we don't collapse.
Well, yeah, Russia's...
Let's feed our people.
Russia's an oligarchy. They're kind of like a...
Gangster.
They're kind of the big local mafia.
Right. My kind of government, too.
The U.S. is, for decades, it tried to be the global mafia. So, yeah.
No, and I say that because I'd rather have government. I mean, they are pretty corrupt. But there's a good corrupt. They're not the corrupt that's trying to do good for all people like our politicians are. They're the good corrupt where you can buy them off.
Right.
That's the kind of politicians you need. Right? Those are the kind that are just looking to get a quick buck. Hey, these laws kind of suck. What if we passed you a few bucks and you could,
if you can buy them off cheap, that's even better.
Yeah, and don't pay your cops very much so we can buy them off too.
Right.
That's what Samuel Adams would call good government. or I would call it good. Why do I hear Rush Limbaugh in the background?
That's what that is.
That's like a bad dream.
Different station, isn't it?
That should be against the law. No, on my headset I can hear the other station.
Yeah, I can too.
750 or whatever.
970, yeah.
Or 970.
970, yeah.
I have to make a complaint to the FCC. I'm gonna have to use some state action. Anyways, what are your guys' thoughts on that? Because I think it's pretty. Obviously, they should be talking about getting rid of all the presidents. But just thought maybe you guys would like to have a little discussion of the juiciness of the state. Anytime a state's eating itself,
mm-hmm.
I mean, you just gotta love it. And having this whole thing, just another example would be like the transgender thing, right? Where
mm-hmm.
the schools are teaching it, everybody's teaching it, but then we're having these, in high schools, you're having boys that are identifying as girls so they can so they can go in the girls' track meets and different things and kick all their butts. And so now the schools are saying, well, that's not really fair because you're actually a boy. I mean, well, you're not. Well, you're,
mm-hmm.
so all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and people actually fall for it. And then,
yeah.
Well, yeah, we talked last time on the show a little bit about the, how the transgender, well, go down the transgender movement, how it's funded by a few billionaires.
Right.
As a marketing gimmick. They convince people that the reason they're unhappy is because they, need to whack their junk off or something. And so they go spend $10,000-$20,000 at a clinic that the billionaires are invested in, and it's just a market.
Why don't I ever think of stuff like that? It drives me nuts. I'm always behind the curve. I can't get a monopoly. I can't get an agenda people will pay money for.
But the society that would fall for it, the society that's so unhappy and so misdirected, they think that it really is their problem. It's a society that really has gone past the point of no return.
You are jumping the gun, but that's what we're going to have to get into.
But the Democrat Party, that you talked about that, the Democratic Party, it's on its last legs. I mentioned Armstrong a lot, right?
Yeah.
Well, his computer was projecting years ago. And I kept up with him years ago. It was projecting years ago that this would be the final the final hurrah of the Democratic Party. It's going down the tubes now. It was going to break up, and that's exactly what you see. You see it breaking up due to the various factions, the socialists versus the traditional Democrats, and they're all infighting. I mean, now they're blaming their problems on this imaginary Russian asset problem. But the reality is they don't have anything to offer. All they do is whine and moan about their unhappiness. And he also projected that this is going to be the most violent election year coming up, at least since the 60s and probably beyond. It's you're right. It's a society going down the tubes.
I think this is actually the first time where I could actually give a 5% chance of this election starting the boogaloo.
And that's
people going
leading into it. Yeah, it's definitely has a chance of leading to that in the next few years. But it's already you already see the violence picking up with the Antifa protests that were going on a few months ago, and people see someone with a Make America with a MAGA hat on,
make anarchism great again.
Yeah, and they get attacked for it. Man, maybe we ought to have our own hat like that.
Yeah, I did one on Instagram.
Did you?
MAGA, and I said, make anarchism great again. I actually do like that. What do you think? As an outsider, David, being that you're a Canuck now, with a real Canuck, actually, it's been kind of fascinating to me when I talk to you about how interested Canadians are, scared, interested, however, which way you want to put it, with American politics. Like, you've talked a little bit about how upset they are about Trump and stuff like that. And it's like, what does Trump have to do with Canadians at all? He can't pass any laws for you guys. But what are your, you probably don't hear anything about Gabbard up there. What are your thoughts about the Democrats? I mean, the conundrum. It's so great. I love it when they set the rules and then someone jumps in the middle of it and then they're like, oh, crap. How do we say something about someone that's in the military who's colored and is a woman? What do we do? I mean, the next thing she needs to do is say that she identifies as a man and she's in.
Mm-hmm.
Then what?
Well, no, I mean, I can tell you about what Canadians think or whatever. The only person I've run into who knows who Tulsi Gabbard is in Canada is also the only person I've run into who knows who Ron Paul is in Canada.
Oh, yeah. That tells you something then.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. What do you guys suppose it means? What do you think it means when you hear in the media or some NPC says that somebody has Russian ties or is connected to Russia or is doing Russia's bidding? What does that mean? Like, if you were to take that phrase, and let's say you were to put that phrase 2,000 years ago in Roman time, what would it mean there?
Well, first, I think they leave it ambiguous, right? They don't want to define what it means.
Mm-hmm.
They want to kind of leave that up to your worst imagination, Cold War thing, whatever. But I think what they're meaning is, so like if you were, I like your bringing up the Roman time. So let's say you're a Jew in occupied Palestine. Mm-hmm. Sorry, folks, it wasn't called Israel, it was Palestine. You're a Jew in occupied Palestine. Trigger words for Christians. Find your safe space.
Occupied again today.
Yeah, occupied by the Romans at the time, though. And you're in synagogue, and someone stands up and says, he's a Roman asset. That would mean you're an insider, basically getting intel on the Jews to turn them into the Roman authorities to get them crucified or whatever. And the purpose of it, because the only people that would do that would be the Pharisees. And they would be saying that against the Sadducees so they could get power over them. Let's get them out of the picture. So, because we're in competition for power, let's get that guy out. So now I don't have any competition, which it's kind of what American politics are. Let's get them out of the picture by saying that you're a Russian asset. You're trying to get, I mean, it doesn't make any sense, the Russian part of it. I think it makes more sense to use the Israeli or the Jewish Roman thing would make more sense to say a Roman asset than accusing an American politician of being one.
Well, yeah, what I was going to say before Dave brought up the Roman times thing was...
Good job, Dave.
Yeah. No, what I was going to say was it means that the person making the claim is really, what they're really saying is you don't agree with my political loyalties, and I have no valid argument against you, so I'm going to throw out this claim.
You're committing treason.
Right. You're committing treason against my political loyalties.
Right, but what they're doing is they're trying to say you're committing treason against this country, against your own people, because Russia's our enemy.
Regardless of what would be right or wrong.
Because they've surrounded all of our military bases over there with their country.
And they're also saying, like, the Joy Bart, whatever her name, the Ho Beast.
Freak show.
Yeah, anyway. What she's also saying is I have no consistent moral or political view. I just flow with what the party tells me, and I have to excuse it. I have to excuse it continuously, regardless of what's right or wrong. Because if you go back 8 years, she would have been anti-war, right?
Yeah.
That would have been her political loyalty. But she has no consistency.
Well, she has no morals. She has no convictions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the other thing, Dave, I think with going back to the Jewish, Palestine, Roman things, let's do a little story when Christ was asked by the Pharisees, should we pay Caesar our taxes? And Christ asked the Pharisees, well, whose face is on the coin that you have there? And they pulled it out. And of course, it has Caesar's face on it. Here's the catch that we don't ever talk about. Having a Roman coin in your possession, especially for a spiritual leader like the Pharisees were supposed to be, was treason to the Jews. They didn't use the Roman coinage because they didn't have to. There was competing currencies. Mm-hmm. And Jesus was actually using that to force their hand to show, oh, hey guys, here's a Roman asset. For real.
Because they must have been paid that by Romans.
Right. So obviously you got it from Rome, give it back to Rome. Mm-hmm. That's kind of an aside, but that's not a well-known part of the story. People like to go, yeah, well, Jesus said to pay Caesar. The whole reason he brought it up was to show, where did you get that money? Because it was a disgrace because they were being occupied by them. Kind of like, let's use the war between the states. You know, if you would have, in a really excellent movie, the best one John Wayne ever made, the Rio Grande. In the movie, his wife, Maureen O'Hara, does his laundry or whatever. He said, how much does that cost me? He said, well, like the boys say here, that'll be 4 bits, please. And he gives her a $10 Confederate, even though the war's been over for 16 years or whatever. And it causes all this drama or whatever. But it's kind of the same thing. You know, if you were in the North trying to pass off Confederate currency, you would be a Southern asset or whatever. Mm-hmm. What were you? I'm talking too much. Where were you going with that, Dave? As far as the comparison?
Where I am going with that is, it's not clear to me what any of these things mean anymore.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And I'll throw out another one. This one that my friend Corey brought up. He was talking about this. He was watching some newscast. It was a clip on YouTube of some newscast where this guy was talking about like an animal rescue shelter or something like that, or a dog training facility. And they're interviewing the guy and he's talking about the event. And then right at the very end of the interview, he says, and Jeffrey Epstein did not kill himself.
Right.
And then they cut the interview and they go back to the news studio or whatever, and the anchors are there, wide-eyed, like, oh, okay, and now a few commercials. So what is that? What does that statement mean? What does it mean to have Russian connections? And then what does it mean to say that Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself? It means a lot. There's the surface layer, right? And then there's a bunch of stuff below that. And what Corey said, his opinion on what the statement Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself meant or means is that it's a statement of no confidence in the systems that are supposed to bring us valid information about how the world is operating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it indicts the ruling class, so to speak, the globalists, as Alex Jones would say. Yeah. And then, so it indicts that layer, and then it indicts the news media layer as people who are curating what can be discussed rather than people who are presenting information. Mm-hmm. And then it indicts the NPCs who believe everything that's on the news. And that's what makes it a controversial statement, is it overturns most of the established systems that the society is supposed to trust. And so the Russian connections, like, to me, that means something along the lines of anything. Well, like, what does it mean to say Donald Trump has Russian connections? I think you guys touched on it. It's the statement that anyone who might agree with anything that he proposes or says is committing treason. But against who? Or against what? The United States isn't a... what does it mean to commit treason in the United States today? Right? What does that mean? And
there's a specific definition in the Constitution, I think, isn't there? To give aid and comfort to an enemy of...
Yeah, but what does an enemy mean? What's the word enemy mean in relation to that at this point?
And are you talking about the state or the people? Like, that's not clear anymore.
No, it's not. To someone like me, treason would mean, oh, you're cooperating with the state. To someone with the state, oh, you're cooperating with Anderson, or you're cooperating with the Russians. It means something completely different.
Right, cooperating with the state is treasonous to your countrymen.
Yeah,
let's throw that one out there. And wouldn't we rather that Donald, the Great Pumpkin, the Great Orange Trump, had a good relationship with Vladimir Putin than not?
Well, you would think so. And
two superpowers. I mean, we like to act like we're the only one, and there's articles. The last superpower. Well, when you got
big foam, number one finger.
Right.
Yeah.
But when you got 10,000 nuclear weapons, in my book, you're still a superpower.
Yeah, and we're at a point where factions in the state are baselessly
big foam figure.
They're baselessly throwing accusations out at another country, which is a precursor to war, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what are they getting prepared for?
Isn't it interesting, though, that the Democrats are the ones using the Russia thing? Because the Democratic Party, maybe they're pissed off at Russia that it's not as socialist as it used to be, so they're trying to bring it down.
Well, the state needs to have an enemy, enemy to fight in order to legitimize itself.
Yeah.
But I know that the statement about Epstein didn't kill himself. You can relate that back to Tulsi Gabbard, because if anyone's referring to a specific person who's responsible for his death, it ultimately leads back to Hillary Clinton, right? Because that's who people are saying had him killed. But then remember Tulsi Gabbard. What happened with her? She was being accused directly. Before Joy Behar went on in this thing about you're a Russian asset, Hillary Clinton was the one that started that whole thing.
Right.
And everyone knows that if you end up in an argument with Hillary Clinton, you're going to commit suicide.
Mm-hmm. Literally.
Mm-hmm.
Commit suicide. It's kind of been a fun thing to watch too, because
now she's going to be running for president again.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah,
she's talking about
that was actually a ploy that the Clintons had always used, was to claim, oh, we're not going to run for office, and then to the last minute they changed their mind, and so she's doing that now. She's putting together her committee for a presidential run.
Well, she'll come in as the savior of the Democratic Party, because look at all these fools.
Oh, Biden's crashing because his son got caught with taking $16.5 million from a Ukrainian gas company.
I'm above the fray.
Yeah.
Thing. Even though Bloomberg jumped in.
Yeah.
This week. Which I don't know how.
But he only had less than 2% in the poll.
Yeah, but
and it was Bezos that was begging him to do it.
How do you be a billionaire and then trash on billionaires and talk to the people about how you're gonna
You're going to take all the billionaires' money.
Right. You're going to get rid of this pay gap or whatever, and then act like you're not a billionaire.
Well, yeah, it's like Bernie the rich socialist with 3 houses.
Right. Did you see that? There's a monologue going on. He used to go on all of his speeches. He'd always talk about the millionaires and the billionaires. The millionaires and the billionaires. So this monologue goes all on this montage of millionaires and billionaires and millionaires and billionaires. Well, now he's a multimillionaire because of his book. So now it's just the billionaires and the billionaires, the billionaires and the billionaires. The millionaires, they're not so bad. What a rat. They're all such.
If he doesn't.
He knows one personally, and he knows how hard they have to work.
Yeah, right?
If he doesn't like billionaires so much, why do so many of his followers go to their tranny clinics?
This way, if he could just, so what we need to do is he needs to become a billionaire. Then he can just jump off the trillionaires and the trillionaires, and then all of them will be off the hook. You know what? Some guy that has several $1 billion that could afford it should just give Bernie $1 billion. Say, here you go, bro, and then he'll drop all of his billionaire talk and
go to trillionaire.
Yeah, then he'll go to trillionaire, which I don't think we have any known. I mean, there are trillionaire families.
I think Bezos got close, didn't he? Or did he make it?
That'd be awesome. I just got to see if you could get close to that. We got a caller, so let's see what they got to say. If you want to join us, you can at 907-458-8255. Hello, caller. Thanks for waiting. You're on the air.
Okay, I was wondering if you'd ever get to me. You're talking about Russian asset, right?
Yep.
Okay, now if a person intentionally becomes a Russian asset, that's a crime called premunire. It goes back to about 600s and England, the old English word. Okay? So, and that is a crime. You might call it a treason, but it actually is a crime, okay? And, of course, treason is a crime. Okay, I thought I'd just throw that word out there for y'all.
I appreciate that. I think part of our discussion is, what does asset mean? What?
Oh, is he still there?
Yeah, I dropped my phone.
No.
What does asset mean? Well,
yeah. What do you think that they're talking about? What are they trying to imply when you hear it? I mean, whether you believe them or not, what do you think that they're trying to get the rest of us to believe when they use that term Russian asset, the word asset?
Well, I think what they're trying to do, if it's the opponent, they're trying to get you to steer away from that person.
Right.
Simply that. Don't vote for him. He's a Russian asset.
He's
right?
Scary.
Yeah. That's a scare tactic.
Yeah.
So at any rate, the word is premunire.
Well,
You can look it up in the dictionary. Okay?
All right.
Okay.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks for that. Appreciate it. Man, it's not even 10 o'clock and I learned something. Good day. Kind of top the whole week. Did I learn anything this week? Anyways, for folks that don't know us very well, we are very, when you hear people talk about being anti-establishment, you can put us a few notches above that. Because we don't just not believe in the establishment, we are against the state completely. Having the state, having presidents, having congressmen, women, Congress genders, whatever. We don't believe in them at all. They should not exist. They are the enemies of mankind, which is pretty obvious throughout history. So those of you that do know us as being that way may wonder sometimes, why are they talking about politics? Blah, blah, blah. It's useful. Okay. When the three of us may get together, we may not really care to talk about presidential politics so much unless we're just having a good laugh. But I think for discussion for people that don't necessarily have our way of thinking of the state, I think it's useful to discuss it and to point out not just how stupid it is, idiotic it is, but to kind of open their minds, broaden the scope of their mind a little bit of what's going on. So they're not, and not that they're dumb, but when you do have politics in the back of your mind as part of your way of life, and that's really what it turns into, is politics becomes a way of life in America, especially in America, I would think. For a lot of people, politics is their religion. The state's their religion. We're just trying to open up people's minds to some of these things. Like, oh, you don't think that when you hear those guys on Patriot Lament say war is the health of the state, and you think that that's silly, well, we're pointing out that that's not silly. Because here you have a woman, Tulsi Gabbard, who they should be, by all their other rhetoric, Tulsi Gabbard should be held up as high as possible in the Democratic Party as that's our gal, because she's a woman of color and in the military. So that should be their knockout, drag out. Everyone in the Democratic Party should get behind them. They're not. Why? Because she's anti-war.
Mm-hmm. Which shows you where the nation is leading,
right,
fairly soon, and that's why I guess that's a reason to pay attention to it. If you're in an area that's going to be affected by a war with nuclear powers, maybe you ought to move away from the bases. I don't know. There's some practical applications to it, right?
Well, let's talk about. We got about 10 minutes
mm-hmm.
here. Why don't you guys, Dave, you start here for me. When we hear or say the term, when we use it, war is the health of the state. I'd like both. Let's have a little discussion about that. What does that mean? What's that mean to you?
To me, it's the ultimate tribal unifier.
Mm-hmm.
When times are good, you can isolate yourself a little bit more from your community because you have enough. If you're struggling, like if there's a flood or something like that, you'll band together with your neighbors and pile up sandbags or whatever. But when times are good, especially in the modern era, you can recede into your home and recede from your community and go online and talk about how everybody who disagrees with you is an idiot and the world would be better if they didn't exist. And war is a way for the state, war is a way of synthesizing a natural disaster. It's a way of creating a man-made disaster where you force everyone to unify around a single objective. With the threat is really that they'll be socially ostracized if they don't go along. If you oppose a war in the lead up, well, that's okay. But if you oppose a war while it's going on, the belief is that nobody's happy about that because, well, my son's over there. How can you oppose how can you oppose him?
Mm-hmm.
That sort of thing. And so it's the easy button to get everybody singing off the same sheet of music again. That's what it means to me. And then there's a bunch of things that come out of that.
Right. With the state as the head, the leader that everyone's rallying behind. Patriotism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and as we've seen in the so-called war on terror. As we've seen in the so-called war on terror, it's the policies abroad are the policies that are going to. The policies abroad are the policies domestic too. The military state that you see growing overseas is the police state you see growing here.
Aha!
And also, I want to point Dave's comment remind me of an old Star Trek episode, the original series.
The only one that should exist.
No, Next Generation was good.
Oh, get out of here.
I love the Next Generation. Anyway, okay, it was
Kirk.
Picard or Kirk for what?
Who's the best?
For president.
For president?
For universe.
President of the universe.
Captain Kirk, hands down.
Anyway, I think it was called A Taste of Armageddon. And it was an episode where two planets are warring with each other. Well, they had been warring with each other. So war became the natural state. And it was assumed that you had to have war. But war is very expensive, very destructive, and it's a big burden on society. So it's a lot easier just to program a computer to simulate the war. And then the computer decides who's going to die in that war. And if you're selected to be a casualty, then you go to the incinerator booth gladly, patriotically, and you incinerate. And so that was the episode. It is the duty of every citizen to, if they're called, to be a casualty of war. And it was really a twist on the idea of the draft. If you're called up for the draft, then it's your duty to go become a casualty of war. But it reminded me of what Dave was. It reminded me of what Dave was saying, just now about a war is an artificial natural disaster, an artificially created natural disaster that causes people to form feelings of tribalism, and if you don't go along with it, well, then you're ostracized. You're not fulfilling your duty. So
that actually sounds like a good idea, minus the go and get incinerated. Since we have such computers that are so amazing now, they should just do wars by simulation, and then whoever wins, you just get a sticker or something. Like, let's have Russia and America. Let's not have a real war. Or China. China's better. Let's just do a computer simulation of who wins, and then you get to show it on the news. Yeah, we won. In fact, let's go even bigger. Madden's pretty big. People love to play Madden football game. We could have each president just, have their little wars online.
Yeah.
Then, you'd probably see a lot younger presidents, like probably get a few 16, 17-year-olds become presidents. Like, those old 70-year-old dudes, their sons have arthritis, and they're like, how do you turn this thing on? It was called Armageddon. I'll have to check that out.
It was, I think it was called A Taste of Armageddon.
Yeah, it is. If we think back to 9/11, that when the towers fell, and we were all sad, especially when Tower 7 fell. That was the most. That one hit me the hardest. When the towers fell, the cry was for revenge for our countrymen, right? Revenge.
Right.
And immediately you have the president standing up there saying, "We don't run, we don't hide, we're come get you."
These colors, these colors don't run. That was the thing, yeah.
And you can remember how many kids joined the military then out of patriotic duty, right? Why did you join? Well, after 9/11, I felt I had to. It was my duty to go defend America. So using that war, rallied people behind Bush and behind the government. People who were generally anti-war even at the time were, well, we've got to do something. I think even Ron Paul voted to go into Afghanistan, which he regretted later. Not to the extent that they did, but His vote was a limited basis, blah, 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 whatever. But even he did vote on something to retaliate. So it's a very powerful thing. And Mike, you mentioned foreign policy becomes domestic policy. And Madison, I always like to bring up those old dead guys, said way back when, 18, whatever, might even been 17. He said, if tyranny is ever to come to America, it will be under the guise of a foreign enemy. And I mean, those words were probably the most brilliant and prophetic of any of them that any of them said, really, if you look at it, because people Christians especially like to say, the America can only survive it if it's a Christian nation. Well, and they ignore what Madison said when he said that under the guise of a foreign enemy, it's the only way tyranny will come here, because that has been the way that tyranny has come to America. Every time there's a war, foreign policy turns into domestic policy. We're not old enough to really remember, policies from the Vietnam War or policies from World War II, but we can read what the government did and forced on Americans during World War II. We can read what Lincoln, the savior of America, did to Americans who were against his war against the South. But we're sure the heck old enough to see what's happened to American liberties because of what's happened in 9/11 to keep us safe from the outside enemy. So anyways, you got a closing thought. You got about 5 seconds because we're at the break.
Well, we've had a lot of enemies since World War II. We've had the Germans, the Russians, the Chinese, the
North Koreans,
Vietnamese. That's a lot of tyranny. A lot of tyranny and oppression.
That's a good point. All right.
Okay.
We're at the break. We'll be right back. This is Patriot Lament. We'll take your phone calls the next hour.
DK 97.5 FM Fairbanks, the heartbeats of Alaska.
Disputing impeachment testimony, one of the three amigos. I'm Jane Metzler, Fox News. In an exclusive interview with Fox's Ed Henry, Energy Secretary Rick Perry denies any involvement in an alleged quid pro quo investigating the Bidens in exchange for a White House visit and military aid to Ukraine. EU Ambassador Gordon Sondland claiming Perry knew all about it when he testified on Wednesday in the House impeachment hearings.
Not once was the name Burisma or the Bidens mentioned to me, not by the president, not by Rudy Giuliani, and not by Gordon Sondland. And if there's anyone saying anything different, then they're surmising. And that's not a wise thing to do. I know what I saw. I know what I heard, and I stand by my statements that I made all along and will continue to.
Perry choosing not to testify or turn over related documents as President Trump requested, and he does not believe the president will be removed from office. In another exclusive interview, Ed Henry asked Rudy Giuliani, the former New York City mayor and the president's personal attorney, this.
Are you afraid, Mr. Mayor, that you could be indicted? Oh, wow. But how long have you known me, Ed? I've known you several years. You think I'm afraid? I don't know. You think I get afraid? Well, I did the right thing. I represented my client in a very, very effective way.
President Trump continues to praise Giuliani as several witnesses testified this week. Former National Security Advisor John Bolton is not a fan. Giuliani had this message for him.
Get your facts straight. For John to say I'm a hand grenade, well, then he's an atomic bomb.
Vice President Mike Pence making an unannounced trip to Iraq, thanking the estimated 5,000 U.S. troops stationed there. America's listening to Fox News.
When you love the outdoors, fall and winter in Alaska are full of sporting opportunities, like small game hunting, predator calling and trapping. And Frontier Outfitters has the Alaska-proven outdoor gear you want. Plus, a great selection of rifles, shotguns, handguns, and ammo. Frontier has all the traps, snares, predator calls, and snowshoes you'll need as well. Need ATV and snow machine accessories? Well, they're right downstairs at Century Hardware. Enjoying fall and winter in Alaska. It starts with a trip to Frontier Outfitters for your Alaskan lifestyle.
November is the time when you really start to feel the pain of your home's bad windows, which makes it the ideal time for Renewal by Anderson's Countdown to Black Friday window sale. Their window sale is going on now and ends on Black Friday, and it's their best discount and best financing of the entire year. Get free installation on everything and take an additional $50 off every window and patio door with zero down, zero payments, and zero interest for 2 years. Renewal by Anderson's Countdown to Black Friday window sale ends on Black Friday. But until then, get free installation on everything. Take an additional $50 off every window and patio door and don't pay anything for 2 years. Renewal by Anderson's Countdown to Black Friday sale is their best discount and financing of the year. Call before November 29th, 885-3100. 885-3100. That's 885-3100.
Locally owned and operated, independent rental on South Cushman. They do small engine repair, and they have the best shop rate in town and the fastest turnaround time. We all understand that snowy months are here to stay, so bring in your winter equipment for service and repair. We're talking chainsaws, log splitters, snow blowers, and other equipment you'll be using over the next several months. Get a tune-up and get it running right. Hey, it has to run when you need it to run.
Independent rental, 2020 South Cushman. We're here to help.
Ladies, have you ever felt bloated for no good reason? Pelvic pain or pressure? Too full, too fast, even if you're eating just a little bit? Not so unusual, right? But if you have any of these things and they go on for 2 weeks or longer, see a doctor. Because bloating, feeling too full too fast, and pelvic pain or pressure that doesn't go away can be signs of a gynecologic cancer, like cervical, ovarian, or uterine cancer. And if your periods are heavier or longer than usual, or you have bleeding after menopause, see a doctor right away. It may be nothing, but find out for sure. Learn the symptoms. Listen to your body. For more information about gynecologic cancers, call 1-800-CDC-INFO. That's 1-800-CDC-INFO. A message from HHS and CDC's Inside Knowledge campaign.
Master Christ, our new King. Angels from the realms of glory, wing of light above the earth. Ye who say creation story, now proclaim Messiah's birth. Come and worship, Master Christ, the new King. Shepherds in the fields are fighting, watching on the flocks by night. God with us is now residing, yonder shines the infant's light. Come and worship, Master Christ, the new King. Sages, leave your contemplations, brighter visions beam afar. Seek the great desire of nations, ye have seen his natal star. Come and worship, Master Christ, the new King. watching, longing, hope, and fear. Suddenly the Lord descending in His temple shall appear. Come and worship Him, come and worship Him. Worship Christ, the newborn King. Worship Christ, the newborn King.
Oh, yeah. That was my boys, Theocracy. If you guys don't know Theocracy, you need to get to know Theocracy. They don't actually have a Christmas album, which is irritating, but they do have a lot of Christmas songs. You can just get them on YouTube. I think you can go to their website and download it to their MP3s to your phone, but YouTube works, so there we go. They're one of my favorite bands, especially at Christmas time. And if it's after July, it's Christmas time. All right. Again, make sure you can check us out on YouTube here. You can get on, watch us live, and interact with the live chat there if you want. You can join the conversation, of course. It does not have to be about what we're talking about. You can steer us in a different direction, and we may hang up on you. We may not. But the number is 907-458-8255. We do like the phone calls. Like we said, we were doing the podcast together whilst we took our break from the radio, and the one thing we missed was interaction with the callers. Because to us, it's our community. Interaction with the community. The temperature of Fairbanks and beyond, as Rush Limbaugh. Is it Rush Limbaugh that says that? Getting the temperature of the nation? Or is that Sean?
I don't know. I don't pay attention to them.
Both should be listened to carefully.
Yeah. Very, very carefully. Yeah. Sean's always actually one of my favorites because he was so anti-Trump before Trump. And then when Trump got in, he's like, we should all love Trump. Let's not talk about them anymore. That's enough politics.
I'm okay with that.
Let's talk about.
You mentioned Tucker Carlson in the first hour. A friend of mine in Seattle, Josh in Seattle, is a huge fan of Tucker Carlson. And it's funny because we all, back in our libertarian phase, we all dabbled in Tucker Carlson, and then he was kind of a sellout back then, I guess. I don't know if that's fair. That was my assessment of him back then. He wasn't a hard line on anything.
Maybe he's just finding himself or something.
Could be, maybe as we were. But he had some positions that he was moving around on, and so I kind of stopped following him. And about a year and a half ago, not far before Christmas last year, in fact, Josh in Seattle started sending me a bunch of Tucker Carlson clips, and I was like, dude, I already know Tucker Carlson. I stopped watching him 5 or 6 years ago, and he's like, yeah, me too. But you should check these clips out. So I started watching some of his stuff, and this was before Gabbard really got on the scene. I don't know if that's true, but Carlson was talking about a bunch of really anti-war stuff. And so my friend Josh was sending me all these clips. And then Carlson had this book that came out. Let me see if I can pull it up. And when I flew through Seattle on the way to visit my folks for Christmas. And he's got a new book that comes out. Yeah, no, it came out last year, Ship of Fools, October 2nd, 2018. And I swung through Seattle on the way home for Christmas, and Josh handed me the book. He's like, you might want to peruse this. And I gave it a scan, and it wasn't a partisan book really. It was that the ruling class, which is what he calls them in the book, and not exclusive to politicians, but people in business and all sorts of places, were essentially anti-family. Like, his main point was that all of these different layers, from political agitation to social justice movements to materialism and all this, manipulative advertising to global warming, fear mongering, all of these things were in some way intended to supplant the authority of the family in society. And his overarching point was, something along the lines of that you can't have a society if you take away the foundation, and the foundation is always the family. It's the spouses and then the children, and then it grows outward from there. Your intimacy of relationships grow outward from there. And so Josh started getting really, like, over the course of 2019, he's gotten really, really into Tucker, and that's his one issue now is that any issue or event or whatever that makes families stronger or could make families stronger, he supports. And any issue or event or whatever that erodes the authority of the family, both in decision making and in perceived social value, he opposes. That's his one issue. And so it's an entirely pragmatic worldview, right? It's not like a faith-based worldview or a particular experience that he had. It's just this pragmatic one where he puts the family at the top, and then everything else is a lower priority than that. And what's been interesting in talking to Josh about that is that his values have, as he's listened to Tucker and skeptically analyzed Tucker's position, he's been like, these positions are pretty good, and it's reoriented some of his values, and many of my values have been reoriented radically in the last few years through experience, and then also through religious experience, like through life experience and then religious experience. And Josh couldn't quite relate to some of that because it was my personal experience, not his. But through his own pragmatic process of structuring values that create long-term sustainable relationships in the family, we've converged on largely the same thing. And so that's been very interesting to talk about. And those values are almost universally opposed to modern talking points. Not in all cases, but in most cases. So, and Carlson, the further he's gone on that road, the further outside the mainstream he's gotten. He's still on, but he's on Fox, I guess. So sometimes, but he doesn't align with Kennedy or Limbaugh or Glenn Beck or any of these guys anymore. He really has figured out what his position is.
Yeah, interesting how that position with his view on the family now aligns with his being anti-war. War is not good for families. Doesn't matter how you want to put it.
Not on either side.
No, there's it's not good.
One of his kind of larger views is that the state and the family are in competition with each other on basically everything.
Well, they are. We got a caller. Let's take the call, Dave and Mike, and then we'll revert back to that because that deserves larger discussion for sure. Hello, caller. You are on the air. Thanks for holding.
Yeah, hey guys. Well, I actually wanted to dovetail into that and that topic because I'm familiar with Tucker, but I wasn't familiar with that book. that he wrote, but that is the crux of everything we see around us, is this depopulation agenda. So if you look at global warming, that's meant to limit you. They'll tell you the most wicked thing to produce carbon would be human beings. So don't produce any of those. Yes. And, just live in a condo and drive a Prius and eat soy food and stuff like that. Be a soy boy. That's the solution. Don't eat meat under any pretense. Absolutely do not eat red meat. And if you look at all this stuff we've been going through in the last 50, 100, 150 years, it is geared around the destruction of the family. In fact, one of the greatest books to read about that is one of the oldest books in the Western canon, which is The Republic by Plato. And if you look into that, you realize that it's actually eugenics. It's actually the breakup of the family. Kids will become wards of the state. And it's the breakup of monogamy or any sort of marriage relationship between a man and a woman. There'll be just a small elite that will have harems like King Solomon and things like that. So, you could say, well, that's just a book from 3,000 years ago, but you can also read Brave New World and you see this theme repeating itself. And then you say, okay, well, these are just crazy guys you're telling me about. But then you find out that Julian Huxley was the head of UNESCO, and his brother Aldous Huxley is the one that wrote Brave New World. So, these are people that are in positions of power telling you about their plan. And the plan is what you just described there with Tucker, is that family equals bad, state equals good, and it's basically a death cult.
Mm-hmm. I think in the UK, they refer to parents as caretakers now. Like there's a legal term for them.
Right.
Something along those lines. And it makes it easier to transfer ownership, you could say, of minors to different caretakers.
Do you guys remember when Trump and his daughter Ivanka were talking about this new program for child care, daycare to be paid for by, I don't know, the federal government, or some sort of subsidies for child care for working women? Remember that? Mm-hmm. They kind of pushed that. That was like Ivanka's thing in the administration. Not really sure why she's in the administration, but she is. And her husband. That's a big problem. But they're in there and they're pushing that. And the conservatives, so sort of the neocon types were like, yeah, that's great. That's going to increase birth rates, because that's sort of actually it's going to reduce birth rates. So if you read any of the documentation from the Rockefeller Foundation, the Ford Foundation, the people who really run the show around here, they said, going back in the 1960s, if we get everybody in, the women in the workforce, we're gonna solve this population crisis. Get them in the universities, we're going to solve this population crisis. We know how to solve the population crisis, okay? Now, ostensibly say, well, we need to these birth rates, we need to restore the family. Here's our solutions. And it's never the opposite of what the Rockefeller said they were going to do to bring things down. It's not going back to a nuclear family with one earner, or with, one, and I don't care if it's man or woman, spouse taking care of children full time. That's not what they provide as a solution. Then you realize what they provide as a solution is basically more neoliberalism that's going to lower the birth rate even more. Then you find out that's why you got to bring in mass migration, and tens of millions of people need to move around the globe at a rapid rate. So, then you reach energy level 9,000 and you become a Super Saiyan. So it's just, it's unbelievable. And I'm glad that you brought that up, that Tucker has seen what this is really all about, because that's kind of been my conclusion as well.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, thanks for calling in on that.
Good show. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, appreciate that very much. Very well done. There is there's an old saying. What is it? How's it go? God and country, right? It's kind of an old conservative saying, and some of them say, God, family, and country. Some of them leave out the God and just say family and country. Some of them just say country. The state is in competition to just say state, or leave out family, leave out God, or when you're referring to God, we'll be your God and we'll be your family. It's necessary, and I don't think people let's think about it in this way, folks. It's necessary for the state to become more important than your God, or to be your God and to be more important than your family. It's necessary for its survival. Mm-hmm. It's not just something like, they're power hungry, or it's not just a saying. It's a necessity for the state to become the most important thing in your life. Welfare. We will be your provider. You don't need a God to provide for you. Single moms, you don't need a husband to help provide for you. Children, you don't need a mother and father to help provide for you. I understand there's single moms, right? I understand there's single moms having a hard time. I understand there's mom and dads that have hard times trying to provide for their families. That is for charitable organizations, and for religious people, it's the church's job to take care of that. And the state has done a very, very good job out of necessity. For its survival, it needs to take the place of these things, and has done a very good job out of its necessity to, let's take churches, for instance. Well, good thing we have the government taking care of all these single moms. Good thing we got the government taking care of these poor mothers and fathers, or young parents that are just getting started that need assistance, because now we can get on to bigger and greater things, like buying a new set for our band up on stage for our concert that we're having this Sunday afternoon. It's not only the state shouldn't exist, much less have that job. And it's doing a good job of becoming the fatherless person's father. It's done a good job of being the atheist God. It's done a good job of being the believer's God. Mm-hmm. It's done a good job of being the single mother's husband. And I mean, to a less dramatic extent, a single dad's wife, to say. Mm-hmm. Just the way society's made, men are more able to probably provide if he's single and has a child. But who's raising him? Mm-hmm. Well, we can help you. We can help raise you. Do you think the state wants to have pre-preschool childcare because they really care about that children? Because they care about your well-being? Look at the push that there really is to have preschool. I don't remember what it's called. Head Start programs. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I've read stuff here in Alaska, even several politicians here. Head Start's the most. When Dunleavy, the governor, he pretty much cut that program. And the woes and weeping and gnashing of teeth of all these people that came out of the woodwork saying, Head Start is the most important program the state provides for our children. And there's a lot of parents out there that were saying the same thing. Head Start, I need Head Start for one, And of course, they're using the excuse that, well, it's going to help my child exceed in the education system.
Which studies have shown it actually does not help their education later on.
It's bullcrap.
Mm-hmm.
But what they're really saying is, well, I'll take it twofold. I don't want to sound too mean. On one side of it, it could be, I need that because I can't afford childcare and I got to work because I'm a single mom. But it also, for some folks, it's, thank God the state's going to take my kid because I can't handle this brat. And I want to go out and get me a job or go party or whatever, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to take care of him. Here, take my kid for 8 hours a day for the next 16 years. Literally. I mean, it doesn't all fall on the state's not. The state's the problem. Well, the state is the facilitator of the problem, but it's also people's individual choices allowing it to do that. The same with the church that I was referring to earlier. It's the church's fault that the state has been allowed to take over as people's provider and God.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's our fault that me, us, all of us, everyone knows, it's our fault that the state has been able to take over as provider instead of charities. Like, we have a great one here that Mr. Dang it, what's his name? But the food bank here,
mm-hmm.
That's a great thing. But it's our fault that the state's been able, and there's plenty of people, because I've done the same thing. Well, if I wasn't taxed 67% of everything I make, I'd be able to give more. Rah, rah, rah. And immediately I always get kicked in the teeth with Jesus showing his disciples of the widow putting her last 2 pennies in the jar, mm-hmm. or in the offering plate.
Mm-hmm.
It's our fault that women feel the need to have abortions and things like that, even though, we have the great place here, the Find Out Free Clinic, and those people do a wonderful job. Mm-hmm. And we should support them monetarily and however, which way you can, donations, whatever. But the state's the one that's out there and say, hey, we'll take care of it. We'll pay for your abortion.
Mm-hmm.
If you decide you don't want to, we'll take care of the kid from cradle to grave, baby. You don't need a man in your life. You don't need to have, and it goes back to what Dave was saying with the family structure. We will destroy the family structure so we will be your family. And it's not done because of some, it is diabolical. It is evil. But it's absolutely necessary for the state to be as powerful as it is. It's necessary for them to become the facilitator of all of our needs. Mm-hmm. Father, mother, husband, wife, parent.
And God. And to do that, first they needed to have a market to play to. So first you had to go into the schools and promote the promiscuity to create the problem. Because there was a time when it was considered shameful to be in that position. And not that those people should be judged, but it was the state that actively went out and made it okay.
You notice that a lot of that happened after World War II. There's a big change in that. Mm-hmm. I won't go into that discussion. I remember Mayberry talked about that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Along those lines,
the Europeans are more degenerate, and our soldiers went over there and are like, whoa, and they brought it back.
You guys know about Franklin Delano Roosevelt's Four Freedoms?
I've heard of him. Where was it?
Okay, yeah. Well, I remember the first time I went to D.C., going to see the monuments. There's the FDR monument, and on it are the Four Freedoms. And the Four Freedoms were given in the 1941 State of the Union Address about a year before the U.S. Entered World War II. So about a year before Pearl Harbor. Delivered his speech 11 months before the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. So the Four Freedoms. These are the things that he proposed everyone in the world ought to enjoy. And of course, the the implied meaning of that is that states around the world should provide everyone with these four things. Number one is freedom of speech. Number two is freedom of worship. But worship what? Number three is freedom from want. And number four is freedom from fear. And what's interesting about those is those are the things that Christ guarantees. And they're guaranteed in a non-material sense, right? You'll be given everything you need, and you have nothing to fear.
Well,
and the truth, it's always best to tell the truth. But the freedom from that being uncomfortable or hard is not one that Christ ever grants or implies. He never says, "Hey, this will be easy and it'll be great," and people will recognize, that you're attempting to do the right thing or whatever. And Roosevelt in his speech proposed making all of those things safe, as if you can.
Interesting that fear is one. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I just going to say, yeah. So Christ guaranteed it internally, whereas FDR tried to guarantee it externally.
Yep. It's funny that he would say freedom from fear when the number one thing government does is make you fearful.
Everything it does is under the condition of fear.
Right. But it does, in supplying the fear, it does always say, and we will protect you from the boogeyman.
Yeah. Or fear not, or I will crush you.
Right. Or Christ said, fear not, for I will be with you until the end of the age. Governments can't promise that.
Well, they can promise it, but they can't deliver.
They can't deliver. Right. Yeah. I guess, what am I saying? They promise everything.
But then when they don't deliver, they say they just need more power or more authority or whatever.
It's always someone else's fault. Some other external problem of why.
And if the state is the one that they worship, because they have the freedom to worship, then that's who they go to.
That's right. Yep.
It's funny too if the way that he states freedom of religion and freedom of worship and freedom of speech. The way he's saying that it is a granted freedom, right, from the government. These things we shall provide, where those things are, in reality, the way we believe it, those are negative rights. Those are things that are just ours by our humanity, not because of FDR. Well, look at us, great government. We allow freedom of speech in our country. We allow freedom of religion in our country. What are you talking about? You allow. We grant. That's the thing I hate more than anything about the Second Amendment people is, well, the Second Amendment grants us the right to self-defense. The Second Amendment grants us or guarantees us the right to protect ourselves and own guns. Blah. What are you talking about?
Oh, the Second Amendment is actually kind of responsible for them not having it. Because it provided the excuse. It must be because we're militia, right?
Well, it puts in people's mind that it's granted by the state, just like freedom of speech, because you can have your free speech zones. Well, we're granting your freedom of speech, but you got to go stand in that square over there where we taped it off. We're not. So it has nothing to do with a grant.
Now you have the right to travel, but only if you have this card and only if you get searched through this machine.
Step through our x-rays.
Yeah.
What did they call it? The custodians? That's what parents are now? Or protectors?
I think it's something like caretakers.
Caretakers. Man, Britain's gone down a bad. They're so bad. They're just getting worse and worse and worse as far as they're social. They're it's just anti-God, and the way that they are anti-family, the way that they are, they're miles ahead of us, unfortunately. I mean, fortunately, they're miles ahead of us, but unfortunately, that they're going down that road. But I want to stay on the subject with this thing with with the family, with necessity. Do you guys agree with that? That it's not just it's not just some evil thing in the back of the state where it's like, it would be great if they had to rely on us, but that for its existence, for its total existence and domination, it's necessary for it to be all of these things. Mm-hmm. All these things, it can be all things to all men, as Paul told us to be. Well, the state's taken that on steroids, basically. Oh, we can be all things to all men and women and everything. And, of course, I personally love to blame the church more than anything. I don't love to blame. That's not the right way to say it. I do blame the church more than anything because the church has been too eager for self-aggrandizement and for self-pleasure. Basically kind of reminds me of the Israelites when Moses came off the hill and they're having a big party. When he had the 10 Commandments, the church has been glad to let these things go so it can go off and do the real important work of God, right? Mm-hmm. They think by pleasing their congregation, by having pleasurable songs, by having their communion whatever they call communion, by having their offerings, by having their big churches and free mochas. Well, no, they're not free for you guys. You got to pay $1.25. It's been all too willing because it's taken a lot of, for one, resources. They don't have to spend the resources that the state's spending for them. And, people always have said, I've had this discussion a lot of times about Revelations. Well, there's nothing you can do about it because it says in Revelations that these things are going to happen, yada, yada, yada. And I've always asked, why does it end up happening? Well, because it says it is. But why? It's not a self-predicting prophecy, right? It's not saying that because I said this is going to happen, it's foretelling the future. Why does it happen? It's because the church, which is the first part of Revelations, when Christ talks to the churches, because the church doesn't do its job. Individuals don't do their jobs. That's why it falls apart. It has nothing to do with, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's self-fulfilling in that we're not doing our job. Evil prevails when good men do nothing. And that's exactly what ends up happening.
Yeah, I'm reminded of Galatians 5:22-23, which I'm going to put in the comments right now. 23 in particular. So these are the fruits of the Spirit, right? So love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And then against such things, there is no law. And that's still true. That's still true. There's no law against doing the right thing. You may not get the material reward that you would get if you did other things, but there's no law against living that way. And to your comment, Josh, the church has to some extent stopped fulfilling its responsibility because it's being done elsewhere. But that doesn't mean that they're prohibited from jumping right back in.
Right.
There's no prohibition. There's nothing stopping us from jumping back in and doing the work again. And so it's an open invitation at all times to jump back in and volunteer to become something of a twig, and then a stick, and then a tree, and then a pillar in your community. Against such things, there is no law.
You know, there used to be on the books that thing, I think it was called Good Samaritan laws or something, or Good Neighbor laws. Good Samaritan laws, I think they were called. And you don't need to look, because I'll just tell you, because I've looked. A lot of those have been repealed. The Good Samaritan laws, where I love to use this one just because of the experiences I've had with it. So here in Fairbanks, we get a lot of snow. Roads get icy, and we get a lot of people here every year that have never seen snow. Some never seen snow in their life, period. And they certainly don't know how to drive in the snow. And every time the first snow hits, you're like, apparently no one has ever driven in snow before, because they drive like a bunch of jackasses. And there's people off in the ditch here and there. Or sometimes you just go off in the ditch because it's slick. The Good Samaritan laws, and, you know, it's just kind of funny what you're saying. Kindness, right? Goodness. What are some of a good neighbor, Good Samaritan, would stop and hook a chain up to the guy and say, hey, let me pull you out of the ditch so you don't got to call a tow truck, or so you don't freeze, or so somebody doesn't ram you from behind on the freeway here. Whatever road. That's against the law here in Fairbanks. Probably all of Alaska, probably most of the United States now. You can't help people. You're not allowed to stop and pull people back on the road. The state wants to be able to do it, or you have to call the proper authorities or tow trucks or whatever. And the only reason I'm bringing it up is just because even the Good Samaritan laws, doing good to your neighbor, a lot of those things, slowly but surely, they're being dragged away. Have your kid go set up a lemonade stand in front of the deal, even if they're giving it away for free, much less selling it for 25 cents, you know, big deal. Well, you can't do that. So according to Christ, against such things, there is no law. According to the state, there's plenty of laws against such things. Church spaghetti feeds. I remember when they used to have those, or where, you know, a lot of churches back when I was a kid, on Wednesday, all the churches had some kind of a dinner on Wednesday night before the service or whatever it was. A lot of states and municipalities, cities, whatever, have prohibited those now because they don't have licenses to serve food. And a lot of times, I remember, Wednesday night during I think they call it soup night or whatever at ours, which got pretty dull. So they started making other foods. But you would see a lot of people show up that didn't show up on Sunday. And a lot of times they didn't stay for any kind of service or whatever. They showed up to get something to eat. Right? Church doing its job, feeding the hungry. Some people came. You'd see larger families that would come sometimes. And, you know, when you're 15 or 16 years old and you're kind of a punk, you're thinking, those guys, they're only here to eat the food and then bail. Or, you know, that's funny. That guy's got 6 kids and I never see him here on Sunday or whatever. But, you know, at the same time, you could look at them and go, yeah, they probably are pretty happy to get a meal right now. Against such things, there is a law now. Right? There's I can't remember what I was reading some whacked out story about some things that at people's homes even. What do they call when people have I forget what state it was in. Might have been Oregon. But about people that get together for their home groups or whatever. They're cracking down on those because of the how many people were in people's houses, right? Didn't fit code. You don't have enough people for the bathrooms, or there's too many people, they're not part of your family or whatever. It's not a holiday and you're serving food, all these things. And so you got to think, why is that? Why would they be upset that a church is having a food? Do you think that they're concerned that some little kid is going to come in and get botulism or something. Heck no. They don't want that person to be served by another God. You know, God says, the real God, the only God says, you shall have no gods before me. So does the state. You shall have no gods before me. You know, and we like to think that there's plenty of good Christian men in Congress or presidents. You know, apparently Trump's a good Christian man. Anyways, not for me to decide where he's going, but his fruits are kind of weird. And yet they get a pass when they start wars, right? How many people have you guys talked to? I know I've talked to plenty. Well, it's different for the government. The government has a pass, you know. Well, it says here, thou shalt not kill. Well, governments have to have wars. You know, it's okay. Well, I don't think you should join the military because you're forced to do blah, blah, blah. Well, it's different when you're in the military because God gives the government a pass. Where? Where in the Bible does it give it a pass? Because in scriptures, it's not talking to groups. Scripture talks to individuals. What we talk about is individuals, individualism, individual actions, not group actions. There is no such thing as a group action, right? Even the mobs. There's no, oh, look at that angry mob. Rah. No, there's a bunch of individuals doing the same thing. They're each individually accountable for what they do. And it's the same thing with government. The scriptures don't acknowledge government as being exempt from something because, badges badges aren't a license to commit crimes. Individuals are still responsible. And just because you want to throw Romans 13 out at us, and you're free to do that at 907-458-8255 anytime you feel ready to get into it, it doesn't mean that. You're held accountable for what you do no matter what. And just because Jesus didn't tell the Roman soldier, you need to quit this military and get out of it and blah, 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 when he healed his daughter, doesn't mean that he was for or saying that what he was doing as a soldier was good, right? Because he didn't say that. You can use the same exact argument about slave owners. Because the New Testament, Paul didn't write to the slave owners and say, you dirty dogs, you're all going to hell. He said, masters, treat your slaves well. Basically, treat them like Christ would treat them, which would mean to set them free. But you can't take one and say slavery is wrong, because then I can use the Bible against you and say, oh yeah, and how come he didn't demand that this and that about slave owners? And then use the same thing. He said, well, Christ never told the centurion or this or the Roman guard or whatever that he had to quit the military. You're held accountable for what you do, no matter who you're working for. The badge doesn't give the golden arch of being government doesn't give license to do evil. That's all there is to it. If it's wrong for Josh, Dave, and Mike to do it as individuals, it's wrong for everyone to do it as far as, moral, ethical laws. Every one of us has different things that we shouldn't do personally because it might lead to something, you know what I'm saying. But as far as thou shalt not kill, I can't kill you and justify it, Mike. Well, soldiers can't kill you and justify it either. Policemen can't do it. Doesn't matter. They are not a god unto themselves, and that's what they've made themselves.
Here's another conundrum for statists out there, in particular constitutionalists. Let's take a quick look at Section 3 of Article 3.
Should I play some hallelujah music or some kind of spiritual music while we're reading the Constitution?
Yeah, for sure. No, I'm okay without that.
Okay.
Yeah, if you got to. So I'm going to post Article 3, Section 3 in the live chat right here and see how it comes through. So Article 3, Section 3. There it is. Treason shall consist only in levying war against them or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. Giving them aid or comfort. That's what treason shall consist in, giving aid and comfort to your enemies. That is what the U.S. Constitution says. Treason shall consist only in levying war against them, the state, or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. That is the U.S. Constitution, and it says that is punishable by death. That is the United States Constitution, Article 3, Section 3. So, then we have Matthew 5:43 through 48, which is a little bit different.
Is it now?
Is it really? Yeah.
This is Christ talking, and he says, "You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemies." Yeah, we just heard that in Article 3, Section 3 of the United States Constitution, didn't we? But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even pagans do that? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. So that's another one of those conundrums. Or what's another one of those places where the state can't agree?
But I thought Jesus wrote the Constitution.
Yeah, I was just gonna say from the start, the Constitution sounds like it's in contradiction with its own divine inspiration.
I saw.
Then how did it become canonized? Yeah, but it's built right in. I mean, and this is not some hippie 1960s amendment thing or something. This is Article 3, Section 3. Boom.
It's also in contradiction to the Hippocratic Oath, right? I mean, all those doctors who helped the enemy soldiers who were captured and on the gurneys, they should be put to death.
Yeah.
You watch like the show MASH. You watch MASH. All those doctors should be put to death.
I was gonna bring up MASH too because I love MASH.
Oh yeah, so do I.
All day, every Saturday, baby. It's on. I'm not saying I watch it all day, every Saturday. Dear, you don't need to text me because I know I do. But if I could, I would. I love MASH. And that comes up in the show.
Mm-hmm.
A colonel or something will come in and there'll be a North Korean that they're taking care of. How dare you take care of that man over this man over here? And to them, it's just like, we're here to help the hurting. We're here to help people that have been destroyed by this war. We don't care what they look like. He's not our enemy. And we're going to fix him up. They'll have little treasonous things in there where one of the enemies, a North Korean, a general will be sitting there and saying, as soon as he's well enough to travel, we're taking him. We're going to, basically torture him and get information out of him or whatever. I'm like, well, you can't take him until I release him. Well, what's wrong with him? It looks good to me. No. No, look, his pulse is bad. They come up with whatever. That show's a great show. A great show. But you're right, that would. Yeah. So what about times of war? I mean, what's that?
Haven't we been in a time of war since the end of World War II?
Probably since Cain and Abel.
Yeah.
Pretty much Cain and Abel.
Oh, I meant officially.
Oh, the U.S. government officially. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that is a pretty good contradiction. You were just getting ready to come up with another one. I can think of one. Congress shall have the power to tax. Now, pretty sure there's something in there that says, pretty early on too, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not covet. Congress shall have the, and of course, there's an argument of whether taxation is theft or not, but Epstein didn't kill himself either. Yeah, there's many contradictions. And, I had this argument with a guy recently. It was interesting, where I brought up, you can't serve two masters. And he said, well, you're taking that out of context. And I said, huh? And he said, well, Christ is only talking about money. You can't serve God in money. And I said, honest answer here. You really think that that's all he meant? Is that you can't serve God and mammon at the same time? That you'll love one or hate the other? And he didn't mean anything else. So you can serve God and any other master. And he never wrote me back. Disappointing. We got 1 minute, and we got one caller here. So let's take the caller. The caller, you got him exactly 1 minute. Hello, caller, go ahead. Unless you want to hang over till the break.
Oh, I guess I could hang over. Randy here.
Okay. Well, then we'll just have you on hold. Okay, Randy, is that all right?
Okay, thank you.
All right. Yeah, there's plenty of contradiction there, and back to what we were saying. Are we allowed to say, well, that's government, so they have a license?
Well, to say we're allowed, does that mean that we'd be punished if we chose? But God doesn't force us to make that decision.
Can you serve two masters?
The state does try to force us to make that decision.
The state does, and it will punish you on the spot. All right, let's take the break, guys. When we come back, we'll go to Randy, and we'll open up the phone lines at 907-458-8255. This is Patriot Lament.
97.5 FM Fairbanks, the heartbeat of Alaska.
The Vice President making a surprise trip to Iraq. I'm Jane Metzler, Fox News. And with this announcement, Vice President Mike Pence giving troops something to be thankful for ahead of the Thanksgiving holiday.
Today, in budget negotiations with Congress, I'm proud to report to you that we're fighting to secure another pay raise for the men and women in our military, and it'll be the biggest in 9 years.
If that happens, that is.
Congress should have finished their work on defense appropriations months ago. But you all know that partisan politics and endless investigations have slowed things down a bit in Washington, D.C. But I'll make you a promise. This president, this vice president, and our administration will never stop fighting until we get you, our troops, the resources you need.
Pence now heading home. In an exclusive interview with Fox's Ed Henry, Energy Secretary Rick Perry disputing testimony by EU Ambassador Gordon Sondland that he knew all about the alleged quid pro quo. Ukraine's president announcing an investigation of the Bidens in exchange for military aid and a White House visit.
Not once was the name Burisma or the Bidens mentioned to me, not by the president, not by Rudy Giuliani, and not by Gordon Sondland.
Perry choosing not to testify or turning over related documents as the president requested. Ed Henry getting another exclusive with the president's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, asking him,
Are you afraid, Mr. Mayor, that you could be indicted? Oh, wow. But how long have you known me, Ed? I've known you several years. You think I'm afraid? I don't know. You think I get afraid? Well, I did the right thing.
America is listening to Fox News.
Hey, it's Sean Hannity. If you're not watching Hannity right now, you should be. This is a critical moment for the president and for you. America needs to know what's really going on in Washington, and I will give you a take you will get nowhere else on Hannity.
Weeknights at 9 on the Fox News Channel.
We're celebrating American Patriots on Fox Nation, the streaming service that celebrates America. Want to sign up? FoxNation.com. Celebrate America every day with exclusive shows, in-depth documentaries you won't find anywhere else.
I'm Maria Bartiromo from Fox Business. My parents lived the American dream. My father cooked in his restaurant. I was the coat check girl. Today, I'm still working the hardest I've ever worked, giving my viewers every tool I can to help them succeed.
I'm Stuart Varney from Fox Business. My first investment, traveling the world for about 5 years and ending up right here in America. Damn good investment, actually. Fox Business.
Invested in you.
Remembering the victims of the Walmart massacre.
22 people were shot and killed at an El Paso, Texas Walmart this past August. On Saturday, a memorial to those innocent victims was revealed. A golden obelisk 30 feet high now stands as a reminder in the very parking lot where the killings took place. This following a private Friday night lighting ceremony for the families of those killed and for the 25 wounded survivors. The Walmart itself just recently reopened its doors. Police say the gunman, 21-year-old Patriot, drove more than 10 hours from his home in Dallas back on August 3rd for the express purpose of targeting Mexicans in the city on the border. He has pleaded not guilty to capital murder charges. Prosecutors say they'll seek the death penalty. Karen McHugh, Fox News.
Using diffusers to spread holiday cheer, make that sense. Could be harmful to your pet. A viral post on Facebook from a New Zealand woman whose dog had to be rushed to a vet, highlighting the danger of oil diffusers to pets the world over. Marianne White says she was using a tea tree oil in her diffuser, and turns out it's toxic for animals. She then posted a huge list of other possibly dangerous essential oils like wintergreen and sassafras. The ASPCA says cats and dogs exposed to concentrated essential oils can develop symptoms like depression, digestive troubles, and they could seem unsteady on their feet. They say it's best to use the oils in areas your pet can access. And if you suspect they've ingested some, get to the vet. Jill Nato, Fox News. The Democratic presidential candidates spread out today in early primary and caucus states. Former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg has yet to officially announce, but he's made a big multi-million-dollar TV ad buy already. Says he will not accept any campaign contributions. I'm Jane Metzler, and this is Fox News.
November is the time when you really start to feel out of sight, out of mind. Just doesn't work well with your home's septic tank. Let Bigfoot Pumping and Thawing clean it once a year. Your septic tank will last years longer and you'll avoid those rude septic backups. Bigfoot provides 24-hour service from Salcha to Nenana with no mileage fees on callouts. Installations and backhoe service are available as well. Bigfoot Pumping and Thawing keeps your septic system trouble-free year-round. Visit them on Facebook. The Bigfoot with the helping hand. Bigfoot Pumping and Thawing.
Spirit of Alaska Federal Credit Union is now providing interior Alaskans with local health savings accounts, or HSAs. If you have a high deductible health insurance plan, saving money with an HSA makes sense. We can help with the details at a local branch. Then open your HSA account right there. Find out more about our health savings accounts and their advantages at spiritofak.com. Spirit of Alaska moves forward every day with local and innovative solutions for your financial health. Federally insured by the NCUA.
When you love the outdoors, fall and winter in Alaska are full of sporting opportunities, like small game hunting, predator calling and trapping. And Frontier Outfitters has the Alaska-proven outdoor gear you want. Plus, a great selection of rifles, shotguns, handguns, and ammo. Frontier has all the traps, snares, predator calls, and snowshoes you'll need as well. Need ATV and snow machine accessories? Well, they're right downstairs at Century Hardware, enjoying fall and winter in Alaska. It starts with a trip to Frontier Outfitters for your Alaskan lifestyle.
Have you?
Thumpity, thumpity, look at Frosty go. Thump, 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 over the hills of snow. Frosty the snowman was a jolly happy soul, with a corncob pipe and a button nose and two eyes made out of coal. Frosty the snowman is a fairy tale, they say. He was made of snow, but the children know how it came to life one day. There must have been some magic in that old silk hat they found, for when they placed it on his head, he began to dance around. Oh, Frosty the snowman was alive as he could be, and the children say he could let them play just the same as you and me. Frosty the snowman knew the sun was hot that day, so he said, let's run and we'll have some fun now before I melt away. Down to the village with the broomstick in his hand, running here and there all around the square, saying, catch me if you can. He led them down the streets of town right to the traffic cop, and he only paused a moment when he heard him holler, stop! Poor Frosty the snowman had to hurry on his way, but he waved goodbye saying, don't you cry, I'll be back again someday. Thumpity, thump, thump, thumpity, thump, thump, look at Frosty go. Thumpity, thump, thump, thumpity, thump, thump, thumpity, thump, thump, over the hills of snow. Over the hills of snow.
That is my very favoritist Frosty the Snowman version right there. Red Foley and the Little Foleys. That's Red Foley and his little girls. It took me hours one time. So I used to have that on my computer, one of my computers, and then lost it. And it had the wrong, when I hijacked the song, it had the wrong artist on it. So I never knew who it was. It took me hours and hours and hours, many different days to finally find it. So now I have it saved on my phone, so I'll never lose it. So I'll never lose my phone. All right. Oh, yeah, we had Randy. You can join us at 907-458-8255. You want to be part of the program. And we have on the line, see, Randy, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
All right, go ahead.
Nothing important. I was just maybe differing a little bit on the treason thing. It seems to me that an enemy out in the field, you know, gathering together, firing at you and everything is a little different than an enemy soldier who has been captured and is now impotent, basically. And I'm just reminded of the movie Ben-Hur, you know, with Charlton Heston. As you know, he and his boyhood friend Masala had quite the enemy relationship going on there, leading up to the big chariot race. And however, Masala got run over by the chariot and was brought in on a stretcher. And then Judah Ben-Hur went over and talked to him, and Masala said something like, Judah, now you see an enemy, a broken man. And then Judah said, I see no enemy. So, in other words, he had no longer been the enemy because he was just a broken, busted up guy. Though I must say that Masala then did say, there's still a man, enough man for you to hate, to see your wife, your mother and sister go to the Valley of the Lepers. So that was his last dig, but still, he wasn't much of an enemy then.
Well, thank you, Randy. That was pretty good, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, no. Yeah,
it takes some act. I mean, that was really good.
Yeah.
That was fantastic.
Yeah.
It really was.
I also think of the Christmas truce story, World War I, that we talk about a lot. and they were shooting at each other, and they weren't casualties yet, they weren't injured yet, but they just stopped and started going to play soccer. So were they ever really enemies? They weren't. They were never enemies. They were just told to shoot at each other by their enemies.
And I bet they didn't get a biggest pay raise in 9 years either.
Right.
We got some more callers. If you want to join the program, it's 907-458-8255. Hello, caller. You're up next.
Yeah, I was just recently reading an article about Jeff Bezos, and he's a big Star Trek fan, and he has plans of spaceships outside Earth and the Earth becoming depopulated. And, it's kind of a theme among people that are controlled by Satan. And they all kind of have the same idea. They don't necessarily get it from each other, but it seems like they have the same head. It's like an octopus with many arms.
Interesting. I didn't know he...
Oh yeah. He's got big plans, and they're like, Musk and all of them. They're all involved in space things.
Oh yeah.
And they think Earth is a sacred thing. I don't know if it's the guy or just they're Satan is just kind of influencing them that way. But Earth was created for habitation, and it's this incredible place, and Satan doesn't like that. I think he wants to get people off of here.
Well, I don't know. I mean, if I had $900 billion, I'd be doing something similar because it's interesting.
But not for the same reasons.
No.
Well, I don't know what his reasons are. I mean,
I don't know. It's just, if you go back, when I was a kid, I remember the science fiction, and there's always these themes of, and they're spending billions of dollars on space travel to prove that the Earth is just another planet of many. But I believe it was created. The universe was created to show God's glory, and the Earth is the center, of what we have here. But it's life is interesting. That's for sure.
Yeah, that is for sure. All right, thanks for the call. 907-458-8255 is the number to call if you want to call and join us here today. There is, to his point, there is, hey, my boy, this one. There is a movement, there has been for a long time, depopulation or whatever, which I think that's part of what we were talking about earlier with trying to, destroy the family. That's the right word. That's what they've been trying to do, or at least to mitigate the family to just, being as important as a bowl of popcorn, basically. The most important things you need to do is vote. The most important things you need to do is join the military or whatever, state function that's going on. Voting is the most important thing you need to do in your life, which I'm happy to say I saw that Santa Claus got more votes than the people running for city council again this year in North Pole. That's fantastic. Unfortunately, they won't give him the seat, which is ridiculous. I think that's a tragedy of justice. If this is a democracy, representative democracy, that is taxation without representation, because Santa the Claus won the vote in North Pole, and they're giving it to the guy, the loser, who got second place.
Well, shouldn't the mayor's house be moved to the Santa Claus house then?
Well, I think that if
over off of Badger,
if the person that wins the election can't take the seat, then the seat should just stay vacant.
Yeah.
And then let's put freaking Santa Claus on everyone's ballot. No, that's a true story. He didn't. He gets more votes every year in North Pole, as he should. I remember our good friend Winston. he always voted, and he would always write in Mickey Mouse. Mickey Mouse for whoever, or sometimes he said Donald Duck. I'd go for Bugs Bunny, Santa Claus. But kind of back to that caller, though, you know, I don't know what Bezos's ultimate thing is either, but there is what is the prime number I think I've seen is like 500,000 or 500 million people, something like that on Earth. So what they say, the proverbial they.
Oh, yeah, to cut it down to yeah. There's 7. Yeah, they want to cut it down from 7.5 billion to 500 million.
500 million. That's the prime number for sustainability.
Yeah. You know, Georgia Guidestones.
Not just for the government to be able to control, but it's the sustainable number for the Earth to survive is about 500 million people. How they come up with that number is pretty interesting, since we have 7.5 billion now, and it's quite easy to feed 7.5 billion people, it seems, as long as you get governments out of the way to make sure that food is free to flow.
You know, that call brings to mind the Economic Policy Journal article that you sent me a while ago, Josh, which was, the title was, "Given the division of labor, should we accept the conclusions of experts in other fields?" Let me post it in the...
yeah, that was a good one.
In the discussion, yeah, I thought that one was really interesting. Here's the link. Boom. So it's in the live chat. So for people online, they can read it. And so Robert Wenzel talks about a email exchange that Walter Block is having with San Francisco person named Robert, somebody in San Francisco, and they're going back and forth saying, well, division of labor means specialization, and so you wouldn't, if you're making an economic argument, you wouldn't say that somebody who's less specialized should take the job of someone who's more specialized. But Wenzel says, well, it's more complicated than that. And he gets into that in the article. He says one factor that must be considered when checking with an expert is the loss involved in getting the wrong answer. And so he has his own example here of, you know, like a sidewalk encounter trying to find directions in a city. Okay, and you're in a city you don't know. You walk up to somebody, you say, "Hey, do you live here?" And they say, "Yeah." So boom, they're an expert. And then you say, "Can I get directions to this place?" And they say, "Yeah, you go here and you turn here and you go there." And the ultimate consequence of that, if it was good information, is you get where you're going. If it's bad information, maybe you get a little bit more lost. But only in a rare case would it be a big deal. And then he contrasts that with something like a serious medical issue. And he says, you know, if you have a serious medical issue, you go to an expert and you get an opinion, but then you'll get more than one opinion. You get many opinions, and you'll try to find people who have different viewpoints on it. You don't just defer to one expert or experts who have a unified way of thinking, because the consequence of getting the equivalent of bad directions is death. And so for these larger, you know, policy and societal direction decisions, you could say, the reliance on experts is disproportionate to the risk involved in the decisions that they make, because the risk isn't contained to their own venture, in some cases to their own business or their own venture. It's the risk is socialized across everybody. And so he concludes, it's not that we should or shouldn't rely on experts as much as how much time we should devote to evaluating experts given the risks involved in getting it wrong. And admittedly, government influence on experts in many fields makes it much more difficult to find sound advice. which is creating, you have this echo chamber because of funding and then the desired outcome of research and whatever. So the experts who on their own may develop a variety of opinions with a variety of reasons for those opinions tend to converge because there's a carrot in the middle and they all start to flock towards the carrot. So their viewpoints converge because they're all focused in the same direction.
Mm-hmm.
And that gets into like what right population number for the Earth.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Experts.
Yeah, which doesn't mean that they aren't, doesn't mean that they're not the right people to ask that sort of question to, or that they wouldn't come up with a better answer given whatever set of constraints. But they're usually part of a system that constrains their thinking and constrains their perspective.
Mm-hmm.
If you ever want to hurt your brain and watch like CNN or Fox News or something like that, they always have, a special guest is always an expert.
Mm-hmm.
Like, especially when there's war stuff going on. We have our expert, ex-general, blah, 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 or ex-colonel, hoofda. They're always either self-proclaimed or the media person is calling that person expert. They always say our expert.
Mm-hmm.
And that's supposed to make you think immediately, well, whatever comes out of the person's mouth, I should believe it.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's, Sean just said that he's an expert.
You can also separate. You can also have another degree of separation, like the 11,000 scientists that signed the recent climate change deal.
But they're not experts.
Well, one of them was found to be named Mickey Mouse. Mickey Mouse was one of the 11,000 scientists who signed this thing, and so we're told 11,000 experts. Well, that includes Mickey Mouse. So you got another degree of separation.
Maybe Winston's still around. And Epstein didn't kill himself. We got to start throwing that part in a little bit more. It's true.
That Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself.
Yeah.
We should discuss that more.
No.
Jeffrey Epstein did not kill himself.
No,
I'm not. Just throwing that out. I get that.
Randomly, all the time. Another expert that the three of us have in high regard, Maynard Keynes.
Oh, yeah.
Self-proclaimed.
Well, Karl Marx is an expert.
Is an expert. You know that Keynes and Target Liberty had maybe it was in Economic Policy Journal. There was a good article about him. In his earlier life, his interest was eugenics.
Mm.
He was very deeply, wrote a lot about that, and supported different people in the field.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you wonder if that had anything to do with his economic policies, or if it influenced his economic policies at all. Don't know, but it's interesting.
I'm going to put something in the chat here about that
from a expert.
Mm-hmm.
Here you go. Keynes was interested in eugenics from the very beginning of his academic career. His first major academic project was his fellowship dissertation submitted in December 1907. In the dissertation, he refers to Sir Francis Galton's essay, Probability, the Foundation of Eugenics. It shows that Keynes was already interested in eugenics by 1907. And he, of course, is, for people who don't know who Keynes is, he's, I think it'd be fair to say he's one of the founders of the school of modernity, or the religion of modernity that we find ourselves in. The idea of social planning really grows out of Keynes.
And if people don't know eugenics, I'll just read what this from the dictionary. The science of improving the human population by controlled breeding to increase the occurrence of desirable heritage characteristics. Developed largely by Francis Galton as a method of improving the human race, it fell into disfavor only after the perversion of its doctrines by the Nazis. It was actually still very, what was her name? The gal that was it Singer?
Margaret Sanger.
Margaret Sanger, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
She was a very big proponent of that to eradicate the black race in America.
Founder of Planned Parenthood, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And John Maynard Keynes happened to, so, I mean, is it a stretch to think that his economic policies were influenced by his eugenics beliefs?
Well,
because it's killing people.
Right.
Yeah, that's the truth.
It's killing people.
Well, it's probably no coincidence either that it was coincided with the rise of socialism, late 1800s.
Yeah. David, before we go to the calls, we got some callers here, and you can join us at 907-458-8255. You used a big term there that we probably should define for people a little bit more, especially new listeners maybe. What is a division of labor?
Oh, division of labor. Division of labor is like, simple example. You don't have a dishwasher and you need to clean your dishes. One person washes the dishes in the sink. Another person dries them with a towel. A third person puts them away in the cupboard. If you have 3 people going, it goes more than 3 times as fast because you don't have to stop between each step. And so it's where you become good at a specific thing that's a part of a larger whole.
Which is why when you need a great big hole dug and backfilled, you don't do it yourself with a shovel. You call Bighorn up and we come over and do it for you with big excavators. Or if you need a meter to figure out what the RF thing's going on, how much radio waves are blasting your brain, you don't put a little thing together on your cell phone and try to figure it out. You call Dave or his company. All right, let's get to the phone calls. 907-458-8255. And hello, caller. You are up next. Thanks for holding.
Hey, good morning, gentlemen.
Morning, sir. How are you today?
I'm doing all right.
Good to hear from you.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, I don't want to pop any bubbles here, but if you just detune just a regular radio and tune it down to the lower AM frequencies, oftentimes you can detect these noxious waves, electromagnetic waves. And speaking to Mr. Anderson there, mathematics being what it is, we get to kind of define our terms depending on what kind of mathematics we're dealing with. For an example, if I tell you it's 3 o'clock, how did I derive that it was 3 o'clock, and how can I convey to you it's 3 o'clock in some other arbitrary term? But it's because of modular or clock mathematics we're able to communicate mathematically. So my point there is definition of terms, definition of systems that we're using, and models. Like you had a guest on years ago. I haven't heard from him in a long time, but Mr. Mayberry.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and he spoke of models. I bought his Uncle Eric series. It's excellent.
Oh, good.
If you're homeschooling, I highly recommend it. And but you brought up the point of, and you, Josh, you brought up the point, I believe you brought it up, is the destruction of the family.
Mm-hmm.
And it is so prevalent in this country that I used to pray for knowledge to get through this mess that I found myself in. And now, these days, as an old man, I pray for wisdom. And there's certainly a difference between the two. These days, knowledge is at our fingertips. I recall my folks buying a 1965 World Book Encyclopedia set, and that's what I got to learn from. And these days, my grandchildren will just turn to their phones. Hey, you've got a phone. I don't have one of them phones. I'm old school. So, but you're bringing up some of the core sociological issues that we face today in our nation. I'm really proud of you guys, and keep up the good work. I'll let somebody else on.
Well, thank you, sir. Always appreciate your call. By the way, do you guys know who is John Galt?
I don't know. I've been trying to figure out who John Halt is as well.
Yeah, that's even worse.
I have to ask my wife, because she spent the whole week reading that book.
I know one
Maybe
thing.
she figured it out.
Epstein didn't kill himself.
Yeah, Epstein definitely didn't kill himself.
That's a really good point that he made about the difference between knowledge and wisdom, right? Because he brought up, his grandkids got a cell phone. They can pop up on Google and look up anything they need to, right? Where he read it in an encyclopedia. The difference is you may be able to get a lot of knowledge from Google, but you need wisdom to know what's true and what's not. You need the wisdom to know what's beneficial and what's not. Because you can get whatever the heck you want from Google, but having the wisdom and discernment, I think discernment comes with wisdom, or vice versa. They work together very well. And I really like that point. I used to pray for knowledge. Now I pray for wisdom. Wisdom and discernment.
There is a movie that I watched last night with my friend Corey. He watched it the night before. It was at Preston Mennonite Church here, called The Shack, which you guys might have heard of. And it's a pretty interesting movie. Very interesting movie. And there's a scene in there where this guy he encounters this personification of wisdom in this cave. And it's this woman sitting in a kind of a throne that's carved in the rock. And it's like a dark, bleak kind of throne. It's not, it doesn't look desirable. It looks ominous. And so she invites him to come and sit in the seat of judgment, the throne of judgment. Because he's gone through this life experience, and he has these people that he has this person in particular that he hates and can't forgive for reasons that are very understandable. So he goes and sits there, and she presents him. She has a conversation about who should live and who should die with him, and like, you're in the seat of judgment. It's your call. And he kind of says, "Well, this is easy to figure out. No, I already kind of know." And she says, "Well, have you always had the same opinion on everyone?" And he goes, "Well, not really. It's changed." And so she presents him with his two children. And she says, "Okay, let's assume that both your children, aren't identical, and one of them's better than the other, or one of them's worse than the other. Which one goes to heaven and which one goes to hell? Which one would you condemn to hell? And which one would you save if you had to choose? And your son is lying to you right now about a bunch of stuff, and you suspect that your daughter resents you and hates you. So how do you judge them? And you have to, like, you've sat in the seat of judgment, so you not only get to, you have to. You've taken on that responsibility. And obviously he can't do it. So he says, "You know what? Take me instead. I'll go in their place." And that's he takes the third option, which he wasn't presented. He comes to that conclusion on his own. But it was an interesting scene for highlighting the difference between knowledge and wisdom, because you can know about a bunch of things that happen, and people who were wrong, or people who did the right thing, or information. But I make difficult decisions is a totally different thing. Totally different thing, as the caller pointed out. And it's not something that there's no finish line to that, because the situations are just always more complex than you could ever imagine.
But isn't that the kind of situation? I kind of flip things around a little. Think of a president. Isn't that the kind of situation that voters put the president in by voting for him? You're the guy who has to decide who lives and dies for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, how can you expect an individual, just a normal, fallible individual like Donald Trump or Obama or Bush or any of them? How can you expect them to function normally when they've been thrust into the position like that? It's when the president makes a decision, half the country's mad about it, half the country's happy about it, right?
Well, I think they're prepared in a certain way for that, aren't they?
Isn't it arrogant to think that we should go out and vote for a person who's going to decide who lives and dies?
It's
good parallel.
Yeah, it's Rene Girard writes about exactly that. That's a really solid observation. Rene Girard talks about that as he talks about politics as the democratic politics in particular as modern sacrifice. So in ancient cultures, you would, if things weren't going the way you wanted, or if they were, and you wanted to maintain order, you would select somebody out of the culture, out of the society, pull them out, and you would have a ritual. Sometimes it would denigrate them, sometimes it would elevate them.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the ritual, you would kill them somehow, ritualistically, and they would be sacrificed for the good of the community.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were put in you'd take somebody out of the society, you'd put them in an impossible situation, and then you'd kill them to either maintain the order or to maintain the order of the society or absolve the society of, the ills that are in it. And that's what we do now with politics.
Mm-hmm.
Is we elect the scapegoat.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it's just a different selection process, and then they're sacrificed and deified simultaneously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very different way to look at the same subject. Normally it's he's my president, and it's like you're the subservient one, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then why is voting so important?
Yeah, why is everyone voting so important? And that was the sacrificial reason that Girard talks about in ancient societies was everybody knew kind of deep down somewhere that they were murdering someone who was innocent and capable of doing what they were asking them to do.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so if someone abstained from participating, there was no blood on their hands.
Mm-hmm.
And that meant if there was one person, it's like Jordan Peterson talks about cleaning up your room. And he says, if you clean up your room, watch out for your family. Because if you clean up your room and your family's rooms, their life situations are a mess, the contrast will scream and they will not be happy about it. Because by cleaning up your own space, you're going to highlight the fact that their space is a mess.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same with the universal participation in the political is necessary, because if you don't participate in the bloodletting, then the people who did can see the contrast. They know that they have, and they see that someone didn't, and that means that their guilt can't be. Everyone's not equally guilty at that point, and that's one of the reasons that people freak out so bad about a voting abstinence stance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's why all of us here we were involved in the Ron Paul campaign 10 years ago, a decade ago, and let's just say that's why I'm glad we failed at making him the scapegoat,
Yeah, I don't think he wanted to be the scapegoat.
Because that's what he would have ended up being, regardless of what his intentions may have been. As we said in the first hour, the president doesn't really control anything.
Mm-hmm. Nor does the scapegoat. Exactly. Mm-hmm. It's a symbolic position.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about what you two are thinking about, what popped into my mind, with having a scapegoat, or what, actually more to what you were talking about, Mike, with why do we expect this on someone? And, either thing that a president does, half the country's going to be mad at him. Why are they there in the first place? But think about with his politics, what Hayek wrote in The Road to Serfdom. And the best chapter of the whole thing, chapter 10, Why the Worst Rise to the Top. Mm-hmm. You were saying how do we expect to impose this thing on this person and stuff? And I think a lot of times they'll gladly do it because the worst do rise to the top. They're made for it, so to speak. They're I don't know. It's not their fortitude. It's just the people that they are. They're able to get through it because they are the worst. They're the worst of the humans. Who wants to be? Not only why would we want to put someone in that position? Who would want to be in that position? What kind of psychopath do you got to be want to be in that position?
Well, that's a good point you bring up there. The psychopath, there have been studies, and these were done by psychologists who externally looked at the behavior patterns of various world leaders, and so this president, that president, or prime minister. And it's like Churchill. Churchill was a psychopath. FDR was ranked as a psychopath. He was really high on the scale. Like 50% of the people they looked at ranked high on the psychopath scale. And it's rather than looking at it as an evil trait. Psychopath is it's a condition where the brain is not responding to serotonin signals, so it's not able to process the same emotions that you or I would process. About 1% of the population suffers from that. And rather than looking at it as these are evil people, these are people with a handicap. And by thrusting them into that position, we're facilitating the progression of that handicap. We're making them sicker. Rather than being worshipped, they should be helped, is what I'm trying to say. Mm-hmm. And that's not what we do when we go to vote for those kind of people.
I don't think we have hospitals for the mentally insane anymore, though, do we?
Well, it's called Congress,
yeah.
But it's not really a hospital.
It's more.
They got a whole city.
It's more like a congregation. It's more like a hobby club.
All right, let's jump to the phones here. 907-458-8255. Hello, caller, you're up.
How you guys doing today?
Good.
And I'd like to just put a little insight what you're talking about as far as treason, natural resources, space race. One thing a lot of people don't mention today is we burn liquid methane in these fast rockets. The Falcon Heavy Lift, a lot of the SpaceX, they burn liquid cryogenic methane. We got away from rocket fuel that is based on hydrogen peroxide and diesel a long time ago. And they know that as we travel to other moons and planets like Titan, we have methane on these moons and we can collect methane and keep traveling. So for years, they knew that our main source of cryogenic methane was on the slope. ANWR, NPR, they're full of hydrate. So in a lot of ways, giving away ANWR to China has ruined a lot of our space race ability. The two things that are most valuable right now are gold that they use in the hulls of ships and cryogenic methane. So in some ways, giving away our methane, I believe, is treason. The United States doesn't own a huge block of frozen methane anymore.
Yes, I did not know that.
All these new rockets are pure methane, and so is the SR-71 Blackbird. Our fastest aircraft burn liquid methane.
Yep,
and so
I didn't know that.
A lot of people don't, but that's been the main race about NWAR and NPR is not the oil or gas, it's the hydrate methane. That's the future fuel. And gold is really important. The Van Allen radiation belts when we leave Earth are so radioactive that they have to lay an immense amount of gold in the hulls of these ships.
Maybe that's why they keep the price so low.
Well, if you calculate how much gold in the world is really mined, it doesn't go to electronics and jewelry. It's going somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I know a few of the other nation states, like some of the smaller ones, but a few like India, China, Russia, they are purchasing quite a bit of it now. And I didn't think about that. Maybe I've always thought of it as a currency reserve type of thing for them, but maybe they have other means for it.
Well, I've been told that Earth has 100% non-survival rate, that we've virtually killed this planet to the point that the only ability for humans to survive is leaving this planet. And that's a scary thought, but it could actually come down to that one of these days, that the only people that really survive are the ones that get off this rock. So, probably back in the 60s or 70s, they knew that this was going to come, and they put all effort into the space race at that point. All these trillions of dollars that go missing, we know where they're going. They're going into space. And they've been fighting for years over methane. You look at the new Russian rockets, the Satan II, it does Mach 10. You can't shoot it down, it's that fast. And they call these spike drives. And it's real simple. It's just methane, cryogenic methane.
Is that how they're hypersonic missiles? Is that what they use?
Yeah. And that's what made the SR-71 Blackbird so fast, was it just burned liquid methane. If you look real closely at SpaceX and the Falcon heavy lift rockets, and even these rockets are launching from Kodiak and stuff, that's what they're burning. And we know that obviously methane is not a fossil fuel because we find it on Titan and other moons and planets. And we know that as we travel away from Earth, we can always find hydrate methane and put it back in our spike drives and go on to the next moon. The days of hydrogen peroxide and diesel fuel for rocket fuel are over.
Right.
So, really, when I saw Tillerson get into Trump's administration, I kind of suspected the North Slope would be taken, and within a year it was. Now we have an LNG system going to China. So we're kind of giving up our hope for a space race and giving it to other countries, which to me is treason. I would never give that up, knowing that that's one of the most important things we own in the United States.
If Earth is destroyed, does it matter to you which nationality survives in space?
Well, I'll tell you this, that as people go to space, they're going to end up having to lose all their religions. Everybody's going to be welcome to go to space, but nobody will have the ability to bicker over whose religion is more important. So when they start recruiting Space Marines or the new Space Force, they're specifically looking for younger people that aren't tied up with too much religion. So it has nothing to do with a culture or a race of people or a country. Just we can't have bickering or conflicts and religions on a ship.
Well, that'll be difficult, especially because there's always bickerings of who's going to be in charge. It seems to be always what it comes down to.
And I'm sure they've been in charge since the 60s or 70s. This has been going on for a long, long time. And it'll be the military-industrial complex, just like it always is. When they warned to beware of the military-industrial complex, it was a pretty serious warning. And a lot of people didn't heed it.
When who? I'm sorry.
Truman.
Oh, yeah. Eisenhower.
Yep.
Eisenhower.
He warned the people specifically, beware of the military-industrial complex, and slowly they've taken over the United States. We've all seen it. We've seen how they use the massive oil companies to create what's called petrofascism. They control the government, they control the narrative through petro ideology. A lot of what happened in Alaska in 1971 with the pipeline and ANSA and the takeover of lands, these were oil companies that promoted all this. They created the ability to make sovereign drilling companies and sovereign leases and sovereign lands that were separated from the state and from the federal government.
Well, and it happens in smaller African countries too. I mean, they come in and drill, and they pretty much take over whatever government's there pretty easily.
And China's taken over Africa right now. China's really gotten to be aggressive with their takeover on resources, and honestly, I think Alaska and the Trump administration gave it away too easy. They're giving away the Tongass forest right now in southeast Alaska, and those trees will all go to China. They clear-cut Kodiak Island a few years ago, and Chinese ships came in and loaded up all that timber and took it.
I haven't seen any, but with the so have you seen any development with the? I know what you're talking about with Tillerson and the Chinese, the deals, but that's kind of gone on the back burner. It seems like I haven't seen any movement on that.
Well, I see now that instead of an LNG pipeline, they're going to build big LNG icebreakers, and they're going to haul the gas from the slope directly to China on icebreakers. So the whole LNG pipeline through Alaska was just a ruse.
Yeah, I've always wondered actually why they didn't do that in the first place, except for Prudhoe Bay. It's difficult. I mean, they're developing. I know some folks that have barges that are capable of it, but because Prudhoe Bay, the deepest, it's like 30 feet. It's not. It's a really shallow bay. But I mean, you could always, I suppose, build a pipeline out into the ocean, out further. But I mean, the Russians, they're definitely, look at what they're building, some world-class icebreakers that to carry natural gas from their areas and on their north slopes.
Yeah. It's really the same people building the same ships too, ironically.
Probably. Huge.
The same thing with the Chukchi Sea. I don't know if anybody's noticed it, but the Chukchi Sea lease was given to ASRC. Eventually there's going to be Russian semi-submersible rigs off the shore of Alaska on these sovereign, native-owned gas fields. That's been their plan the whole time. We tried to bring up some shell rigs and some different rigs and drill, and they just weren't capable of doing it. The Russian semi-submersibles are the only rigs that are really capable of drilling offshore of Alaska.
Yeah, Shell kind of got the shaft a few times, and they just gave up.
Well,
after you spend a few $1 billion and don't even get to try.
It's just like in mining, they'll use a junior mining partner to set up a lease or a mine site, and then they'll fold it over to a larger company or another company. So they spudded in a couple wells in the Chukchi Sea, and there's gas out there, but it's easier to take that gas directly to China or to an Asian market than to bring it into Alaska. And by doing so, it takes away the ability for us to generate any tax money or any money off of that.
Yeah, I've always, I mean, from a practicality standpoint, it always seemed more practical to me to figure out some way to get it by sea than by building a pipeline, especially because there's so much politics involved in building a pipeline, a gas pipeline down, because Fairbanks is one of the worst. So it has to come through this area right here so we can get our fair share of the taxes on the line, and then we got to build all these spurs here to there. And if you're an oil company, you're just like, okay, so by the time it actually hits my ship, I'll have like a penny per million BTUs left over. I'll just bring a ship in, fill it up, and go to China with it, or South Korea, South Korea needs a lot of it. They use a lot of it.
South Korea uses the majority of our resources right now. Coal, gas, oil, that's where it goes. If it wasn't for Alaska, South Korea would be just as dark as North Korea.
That's pretty interesting. Cool. Well, thanks for the call. We appreciate that. It was good stuff.
So
good information.
I'll call in next week and give you some more insights.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right, have a good day.
You too. All right, we're running down here, so if you want to jump in to join the conversation, it's 907-458-8255. Methane. I know Alaska's got a lot of it, because apparently you go down so far. Well, like when they drilled Point Thompson, the pressures out there, I don't remember what they were now, but it was amazing how much pressure is out there. When Exxon, because we worked for Exxon when they came up here, and they had to invent whatever, different styles of drilling, different styles of drill rig. Well, they had old drill rigs, but they had to retrofit them and everything, and have a completely different way of drilling there because the pressures were astronomical. And I wish I could remember what it was, but the PSI was out of this world. It was one of the hardest, second hardest in the world, second highest pressures of drilling in the world, or the highest. Because that puppy up there is just full of gas, waiting to get tooted down here for us to burn, or somebody to burn, somebody with some dollars. And, it does, from a economic standpoint, I think it makes more sense to go, economically, it makes more sense to take it to Asian markets because they need it. They don't have the, like this guy said with South Korea, they don't have natural resources like anybody does, like we do, especially. And they've had their hand out saying, we'll buy it.
You have that conundrum of, do you save it, or do you sell it, or do you tax it? There's always well, let's drill and extract it and sell it to whoever will buy it. And then there's let's sit on it because they're not making any more.
Right.
That whole thing.
Which is interesting because some of those old wells that they come back 2 years later and they're full again.
Mm-hmm.
Are they making any more? Well, it's all in Alaska. It's always political. Everywhere, everything's political. But I remember the Koreans, the South Koreans were, when they were fighting here, where Alaska was saying, well, we'll guarantee a price of $2.73 per million BTU, blah blah blah, whatever it was. And I believe it was South Korea was like, well, we'll pay you $8. We have to have it. So, anyways, we're at the end of the show. Wow. Another flyby. Closing thoughts, guys?
Epstein didn't kill himself.
What?
But he probably has Russian ties.
He may not even be dead. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We will be back next week. I don't think there's anything that will disrupt that as far as humanly things. Remember to check us out. Our website is patriotcement.com. Hasn't been too much action on there, but Mike has access to it now, and he's going to get busy. And please, like Dave is putting on there, subscribe and like to our deal here, and we will be back next week. Thanks a lot, guys.
Better help.